Two more questions here. I'm really going to try and keep these 4 minutes each. Okay. Why are there so many denominations? It's a good question. Again, a few quick thoughts on this one. Number one, I don't think it's actually a bad thing that there are denominations. You know, if I would say, I'm a Brit living in America, but just think for a minute. There's a $1 bill, there's a $2 bill that you don't see many of. There's a 5, 10, 20, 100. I don't even know if there's a $1,000 bill. I don't get given that many, but they're all dollar bills, but they're different denominations. So here's the thing. A different denomination doesn't mean a different church. It doesn't mean a church that says, we're the real church and you're not the church. So in a way, when there are different denominations, what they're actually saying is we're all part of the church, but we have maybe different leadership structures, different expressions, different ways of doing things, sometimes different beliefs, but different beliefs that still allow us to be part of the Church of Jesus Christ. So when you look at the church, if somebody says, oh, there's 200 denominations, so there's all this division, it's not necessarily true. You know, if you were to look within, let's say, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, there are many different wings and there are Catholic charismatics and non-Catholic charismatics and, more traditional and more evangelical and more. So a denomination doesn't mean a separation, a division. It actually just means a different emphasis of things. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Why are there so many denominations? Usually it comes down to this. If you look back in history, especially since the Reformation, God moves by his Spirit. There's an outpouring of the Spirit. There's often a revelation of truth. And usually the people who get touched by revival get thrown out of the very last movement or the place they were. So the Protestants get thrown out of the Catholic Church. And then sometimes the Lutherans threw out the Anabaptists, who threw out the Methodists, or the Anglicans, who rejected the Pentecostals, who rejected the Charismatics, who don't always get the third wave, and on and on and on we go. So at times what's happening is all of these denominations were birthed in a move of God. The danger is that while they want to protect the glorious things that God has revealed to them, the danger is they construct walls around those truths that stop other truths getting in. The danger as well is at times they fall in love with the kingdom principle that they've caught in revival, but they lose the presence of the king. And then 20 years later, God's moving down the road, and they've caught the principles, but they lost the sweetness and the presence, that it becomes like they persecute the very group that it has. You know, my granddad became a believer in the Welsh revival. You can go to Moriah Chapel in Wales and many of those things, but I don't say that to be critical. I'm just being honest. Most of those chapels in Wales, you know, they're shells on a seashore. There are sometimes good people who, some of them still even preach the gospel, but many of them, you know, wouldn't know revival if it blew in, or wouldn't recognize it to be so. And that's true of most movements, whatever. So again, I don't think we should criticize those movements. I think God is at work in nearly all of them. Wherever people are really believing the truth and haven't given themselves over to apostasy, I think God is moving. Personally, I believe the day of denominations is over, and I think God's moving and doing something. I love people of God. I use the example of somebody like Brother Kenneth Hagin, who was I'm probably getting this right. I think he was a Methodist, a Baptist, a Pentecostal, was in the the charismatic movement, one of the fathers of the Word of Faith movement. My point is, like, even what God was doing in the 90s, the kind of thing, the Brownsville, Toronto, the Laughing Revival, just some of those. My point is, he was at the forefront of every single thing. He was who he was, had his style and way of doing things, didn't throw away what God had done 10 years before, but was always lived at the cutting edge of what God was doing. And I believe it's possible to have a walk with Jesus where we're always surfing the latest wave. Because in a way, there is no latest wave. It's all in this. There's nothing new. We just learn to come back and discover the things we've lost in a way. So I would say, honor the ancient landmarks. I grew up in the Assemblies of God, and they're an awesome bunch of people. I love them. I preach in many of their churches. At times, at least in my nation, they can get a little religious, some of them, but God bless them. I that's not exactly, I want to be more than an Assemblies of God guy, or an Elam guy, or a Foursquare guy, or a Methodist, or whatever. I want to be a follower of Jesus and engage with all of those things. But again, that's where most of them come from. I don't think they're a bad thing, but I think anytime we put more emphasis on the wineskin than the wine, we're in trouble. So, have a wineskin. We all need one. Have a structure, but walk with the living God.